I heard the old man say, John Kanaka today.
Just out of interest, what kind of music were they singing?
The Rock and Roll of 1752.
I manage bands and I'm interested in representing you. You've got a unique sound and we believe we can help you get it released by a major label.
Tuppence, how are you doing?
Hi. I'm good, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Just driving right now, so pulling over to talk to you.
Oh, wow. I'm impressed you can multitask like that.
Yeah. Well, you know, you got to do it, right? Where are you located currently?
Yeah. I'm in London. I'm at home at the moment. I mean, we're still sort of, I don't know what stage you're at there, but we're kind of still easing slowly out of lockdown. And I think that I'm still, you know, very cautious about it, to be honest. I'm like slowly starting to see friends outside and all of that kind of stuff. But I've been locking down solo for the last, I don't know, however many weeks. So it feels very strange to be seeing people again, to be honest.
Wow. You guys out there are doing a lot better than we here in the States, that's for sure. You know, especially out in like California and certain.
It's so funny. I think that, I don't know, I feel like the perception is so straight. Like, it's so different depending on where you are, because we think we're doing worse than everyone, basically.
Hopefully I can give you a little bit of a distraction right now, something to chat about the movie.
Yes, oh my God. Yes, it's so nice to talk about something positive, you know. There's so much sad and horrible news at the moment that it's nice to think about something feel-good for a little bit.
You know, and you mentioned feel-good, and I felt this movie really was a feel-good story. It reminded me when I'm watching it, I have never been to England, so like now it felt like the old world in a sense. Life, I wasn't sure if it was in modern time for a bit, but obviously it is, the movie. But everything's so simple and happy with their kind of everyday lives and just going about just very simple way of life, and they seemed happy in the movie, singing, and just like when you read the script and you were kind of presented with the film, how did that resonate with you? Was this something you're kind of familiar, this sort of lifestyle of a small town in the UK, or is this something kind of that felt to you also like an old world in a way that we don't have today with all this social media and technology?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you know, I think that is for lots of people looking at the UK from the outside, I think that is their kind of impression of how we live our lives. And certainly, actually, I think that in a lot of villages and coastal towns, that's definitely still the case. I mean, what I loved about it was that it felt similar to a sort of a version of the upbringing that I had, because I'm from a small seaside town, and you know, everyone knows everyone, and I was sort of you know, born and raised in this town, and my mum was born and raised in this town, so it felt like I loved the energy behind the script, because I kind of recognised it. My family are all from not quite as far southwest as Cornwall, but they're from Somerset, and so they are all from these little villages, and all of my extended family. So I definitely recognise those relationships and that kind of simple way of life. But having lived in London for the last, God, I don't know, 15 years, maybe more than that actually now, then it felt like something from my distant past. So it was really nice to visit that. And the great thing about shooting it was that it's so infectious, that way of life. Like we all stayed in little cottages in that location. So I walked to work every day, which was a sort of 2-minute walk up the hill right by the seaside. And it didn't feel like any other job that I've done being on set every day. It was so relaxed, and you kind of after work would go to the village pub and you would see everyone, you would see all of the fishermen that the film was based on, and you know, we would all just kind of hang out together like that. So it did become like this sort of holiday while we were shooting.
You know, and that's how it comes off in the movie, because I first thought, when I'm watching it, I'm like, they must have had a lot of fun on set and off set, because it just seems like everyone seemed like a family. It really came through in the film in so many ways, and hearing you speak about it, too. What is it like to have a cast, in a sense, that does feel like a family. It doesn't feel like you're actually filming something. You're on a location, but that camaraderie, how does it help you as an actor and even as a person to kind of get to know your co-stars and have that sort of family feel instead of just showing up to set and doing your scenes and leaving, versus this sort of like camaraderie and family almost aspect to it?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it only helps, and I think that what was really lovely is that James Purefoy, who plays my father, is also from the West Country of England, which is very near from where I grew up. So we already had that kind of bond. We're both from a similar area, and it's very hard not to spend the entire time in each other's pockets. And I think that what was really lovely about staying in the village was that we became friendly with the locals, and you really sort of feel like you're living that life for a time. And then when all of the other characters and the kind of the plot that centered around the record executives came in, then it felt like it almost felt like it was reflecting what was happening in the film, because they would come in for a few days to film their parts and then leave again, whereas we were sort of living this life, you know, staying in Cornwall for however many weeks. And it really helps, because, you know, you would go to the pub after work and everyone will be sat, you know, genuinely singing all of the sea shanties in the pub.
Oh, wow.
That's what they do. It's not like a kind of put-on show for us. Like, it's something that they, you know, and they sing outside in the summer. It used to be every Friday, I think. And they did those shows while we were there, and it was amazing to actually see that, you know, be there and witness that. But yeah, it definitely helped, because, you know, you have to believe that these people have lived in this village their entire life. So I'm so glad that I decided to stay in the village rather than stay kind of, you know, however far out in a hotel, because I think it just enhanced that whole experience.
What did you learn from working on this film? Because obviously when you work on different things, you always, there's something to take away in a way from either on set or off set. Is there anything specific that stands out to you that you learned while working on this movie, or maybe kind of a self-realization or a reflection, that's something that you didn't know that you became aware of through just being part of this project?
Yeah, I think two things. I think that personally, it just reminded me how important it is to get away from the city sometimes. I really love to be by the seaside, and I think it's always very centering, and it kind of clarifies a lot of things for me. So it made me really appreciate taking a break and slowing down in life. And I think that in terms of being in that village environment, it really showed me how important those communities are. And I think that, you know, that they are under, as a topic that's touched on in the film, they are really under threat of people, big corporations and, rich people from the city coming in and buying holiday homes there and never using them, so the community doesn't keep growing and thriving. It's full of, you know, empty, vacant holiday homes, you know what I mean? So it's so important that we don't go in and buy out all of these, like, beautiful cottages and homes as sort of rental kind of money-making schemes, because it's important to be, you know, if you're going to price out people who otherwise would have lived in the village their whole life, or who couldn't afford maybe to live somewhere else, but then, you know, someone else comes in and buys it, just throws money at the problem, then I think it's so important to maintain those communities. And I think that's what I sort of realised, you know, the idea that I think that did actually, what happens in the film when someone tries to come in and buy the local pub, and promises that it won't change to anything else, but you definitely have a sense that it won't stay as the local pub. That's something that I think genuinely happened a few years before, that there was the threat of someone buying their local and changing it. And that's, you know, those places are like the centre of the village. They're so important for the communities there. So yeah, it definitely made me realise that as lovely as it is to own a holiday home by the sea, then it's also important that people who are born and raised in those villages can afford to live there.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a neat perspective, really, to take away. That's something that's a little eye-opener, you know, in so many ways, to just be aware of that. No,
I don't think I did. I think I was just going to say I didn't catch that last.
I've been a big fan of your work and seen so many of the shows, Sense8, and the films, Imitation Game. I've just followed your career for a long time. And, I've had this question in a sense. I'm always drawn personally to British cinema. I just feel, and you could help me provide a perspective here because you've worked also on American kind of films and obviously in British ones. And the thing that always stands out to me is the kind of the rawness and authenticity of British cinema. From your experience on working, kind of seeing both sides, is there something that is there a difference that you notice also when you're working on a British-centric film with a primarily British cast versus like a more of a American, based production? Do you notice differences? Because for me as a viewer of film, I really am drawn to British cinema because I always just feel there's some rawness and authenticity that you don't quite get with like more of an American studio-based kind of film.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think we all know Hollywood as the pinnacle of, filmmaking. And I think that we do definitely have our own thing going on here. And I think that largely, I think the differences come from several things. I think that, not always, but there's largely more money in America to kind of fund bigger production values. And I think that there's also sometimes, not always, but you do sometimes find there's like a different acting style. I think that Brits tend to be less method as a rule, and much more likely to be kind of joking around in between takes, and not necessarily feeling they have to stay in character. And I think there's a sort of a sense of humour there that's always on set when you're on a British film. And I think that also there's I think we have such a high kind of I don't know how you'd say it, like a kind of awareness or like a cringe factor ourselves about taking ourselves too seriously. So we kind of try to subvert that by being sort of overly relaxed and sort of
yes,
like using humour to kind of get through something. Whereas I think that what I do really like about working in America is that that there's like a kind of a real like seriousness to the profession. It's really like well respected, and I think not that it isn't respected in the UK, but it feels like everything is so professional and so kind of glossy isn't the word, but it's like it's
put together in a way
that you're going to be really well looked after. Yeah, together, and trying to find the right word. It's just everything is so much bigger. Like it feels, you kind of get there, and I think even just like the traveling over to work in America or wherever you happen to be working, it's like you feel like you're going on a journey to do it. Like it's so different when you're traveling and you're staying in hotels, or you're staying in a space that you're not used to, or a city, a town, a state that you don't know. Then it's a whole other experience, and there's a whole kind of new set of nerves that come with that. And I think that there's probably a sense of grounding when you're on home turf, that you know slightly more what you're dealing with. So I think that there are good points to both. I mean, as I'm saying that, like, I realise that answer is really rubbish and I'm just waffling. But really, project to project, it's kind of, I've worked on sort of smaller indie American projects and like bigger budget things, and actually everything, I suppose it's not so much the difference that I feel between American and British projects. It's more like the difference between something which is bigger budget and something which is independent. Like, I think you just get more kind of creative, so much more artistic license and so much more opportunity for experimentation on indies, because there's not quite so many voices that are coming into the mix and affecting the creative vision, I suppose.
Final question, Tuppence. I'm curious, what are some hobbies and interests that you like to do away when you're not shooting movies, when you're not filming? What are some interests that you kind of like to get away from the industry and from acting that you like to do in your everyday life?
I'm reading. I do taxidermy, which I haven't been able to do for a while, but I'm kind of getting back to doing that. And I've just started pottery classes. So I'm trying to be as creative as I can throughout lockdown, because I've really missed having an outlet. So, you know, I've started painting again, and I'm just trying to keep all of those things ticking over. Otherwise, I kind of go mad.
Well, that's good that you're keeping busy and staying safe. That's the most important part. And hopefully things get back to normal and you can be back filming things, you know, sooner or later.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today, and hopefully we get to catch up down the road. I'm glad to finally get a chance. I've been a long-time fan, so great to chat.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. Stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Remember what the well-known Irish singer said? I may be plain old Paul Hewson from Dublin. Put a pair of shades on. I'm Bonio.
Bono, you pillock.